Yeah.
All right, welcome to another Tape Talk. I'm here with Andrew Welburn. I've got a lot of respect for this guy. Kind of gotten to know him online through different Facebook groups, mainly the 8-track group, and I always like what he has to say. And, we kind of, our perspectives, at least in my view, have seemed to kind of overlap or align in different ways. And, this is actually the first time that I've ever seen him in a face to face or heard his voice. So, hello,
True.
Andrew. How you doing?
Hello. Good, thanks.
Welcome. Can I call you? Do you go by Andy or Andrew?
I go by Andrew.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine. Andrew or Andy, I answer to both.
sure. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on. So you're kind of a I guess you're a tech type, right?
Yes.
And how long have you been doing it?
I mean, I enjoy fixing things. I enjoy turning something old and discarded into something that's got life again. But it means, uh, it means research, parts, um, and then trying to trying to learn what how things work, and then rectifying things. So yeah, well, I mean, I've always done that. Like a kid, most techie kids. I used to pull things apart, break them invariably, and never get them working again. But then as time goes on, you get better and better at pulling
Yeah.
things apart and having some successes. But when you learn to, so I guess I've done that since I was a young kid. I've always pulled things apart to
What
about the age of
what do you think? Yeah, what do you think your first experience with trying to do what some version of what you do now?
um oh, some version of what I do now. I mean, when I was 16, I got my first arcade game. And then, you know, I got a couple of cabinets, and then some guy wanted I just had the cabinets. I had none of the I didn't have the game board that was inside it.
Yeah.
So I found somebody online, and he would swap my second spare cabinet for three games, and two of them worked and one of them didn't. And so I got it because it was a game called Time Pilot, and from like 1984, and it didn't quite work. And so I started prodding at it, and then I started reading some books on what you have to do. So uh, and then I found the manuals, I found the schematics, and then I was like, well, how do you read a schematic? And then, what kind of tools do I need? Where do I get these tools? And I just kept acquiring things. And then, by the time I was 19, I just decided, this was around, 99, 2000. I just decided, I'd been doing it for probably 3 years by that point, and I'd been having good successes with the stuff that I was fixing myself. And I just decided I don't want to work for anybody else, and I'll just start fixing things for other people.
Nice.
And so people started sending me boards online, and then I started repairing things. And so, as you can see, I have a giant workshop full of stuff. So I have all the parts available for everything that I need to do. But then,
Yeah.
arcade games is my primary thing, but audio is also my secondary thing. And so when you start getting when you start getting into tapes, you've got to overhaul all the machines that you acquire, or you've got to fix them in some way, or to make them sound optimal, you've got to do your servicing on them. So it's just more things to learn, and I love
Yeah.
learning, and I don't stop
And
learning.
I'm
So
sure when you started doing this, it's like people around you started getting maybe a little excited, like, oh, this thing that I got at a garage sale that I don't know, it doesn't work. I can just, Andy will, kind of stuff. Did things like that happen?
yeah, I mean, I was going to flea markets since I was like 10 years old, and my bedroom was always full of old stuff that I'd found at flea markets. So I grew up in the UK, and they're called car boot sales there. And so I would just acquire so much stuff, and even if I had no idea what it was or how it worked, then I would pick stuff up. But my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he had a motorcycle and car restoration business. And one of the things that he had in his grotty old garage under the house was an 8-track player, and the 8-track player was just a really bog standard, car
One
player.
button, just like one.
Just, yeah, one button, no features, no nothing. It was just the most rudimentary system you can think of. And so and there was a couple of tapes, and I said to my dad, well, how can I hook this up? And so for a while, I literally had a 12-volt car battery in my bedroom, and I would wrap the wires around the terminals on it to run the tape player on and it was on my windowsill. That was the only place I had some space in my room, was on the windowsill. And I only had a couple of tapes, and I don't remember exactly what they were. I think one of them was like Cream, Cream something, but it was in a slipcase, and it was a UK version. And I think I still have that tape. That's one of the only ones that survived my many purges over the years. I think I still have that one. But then invariably, I chewed up. One was a Rick Wakeman, and I can't remember which one it was, but it got chewed up within the first couple of plays. It got destroyed. I then went to some car boot sales, and I found some more. And 8-tracks were quite rare in England. So
I was going to say it's kind of rare that your dad would have that even.
yeah, and there's definitely no home players. Like, home 8-track systems just weren't a thing back in back in the day in the UK. Very, very rare. I've seen them online, but I never saw
It
them.
was like a functional. I mean, it was like the most they could invest in going down that hole was that path was just in the cars, because that was kind of
Yeah,
what was going on for portable music at the time.
it was designed, as an automotive. It was designed for the automotive market anyway, as a format itself, and it just lends itself very well to that, because it's just so basic and rugged, to the point of the tapes are pretty durable, and you can throw them in, and they're nice and clunky and chunky. As we all know, the pinch rollers that melt and the splices that break, that's old age now. But I was still plugging them in the early 90s, and they were still working okay. And today you can still plug in Virgin 8-tracks that you find, and they still play okay.
Yeah,
But you don't want to chew that nice tape up in your player, so you got
yeah,
to
for
service them.
sure. So
So
I was going to ask, what's your first just memory of any tape? Like what was the first memory you have of any kind of tape?
it would have to be a compact cassette tape.
Okay.
And again, it would probably be playing on my parents' stereo system.
How old are you, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
When I remembered the tape.
No, how old are you right now?
Sorry, I'm 44 now.
Oh, okay. All right. I just want to point of
something like
reference. I'm 50, so I just was
Right.
trying to like compare it to like when that would have been for
Yeah.
maybe whatever.
So
Cool.
you're talking mid 80s. And the thing is, my dad in the early 70s, he was a bit of a flash guy in that time, and so he had a lot of cassette tapes from.
Wait a
Like,
second. What is that? Okay, you said he's a flash guy. What? Put it
he was
in American terms.
he had we're we're not posh people. We're not from a posh, very firmly working class, but he would spend his money, and he drove giant American cars in England, which was ridiculous in the
Okay, I
1970s.
see. Yeah.
And he would go to London to get his hair cut. And he'd play golf in the mornings, and he was a mechanic, but he was but him and he was just known as a very flash, sort of flash
I
guy.
see. Yeah, I see. Flash. Okay, yeah.
So he would have bought, and so he bought cassette tapes. And so some of his tapes, when I was a kid, what you'd see by your parents' stereo was, what cassette tapes did they have? And so the ones he would have were all from like 1970-ish. So they were the ones that had like the gold tops and very square edges to the cassette
yeah,
cases
yeah.
themselves.
Right.
The kind of cassette tape that if you threw it around, you'd draw blood if it hit you in the face, kind of thing, as you do as kids.
Yeah.
But there was, and he was a huge fan of the Beatles. So like Revolver, Red Rose Speedway, for Wings, following that. But then, Sergeant Pepper's. So yeah, there was a lot of Beatles that I remembered.
Was that it was that first, compact cassette, having your parents, was that meaningful to you at all? I mean, like, when did you feel like you kind of made a connection with tape,
I thought that it was kind of magic that you could hold this thing in your hand, but you'd put it into this thing and it would fill the room with voices and sounds, and that in itself was magical to me. But the linear the linear access mode of cassette tapes, where you had to wait for the next song, or you had to fast forward, or if there was something you wanted to listen to at the beginning of it, you had to rewind it and you had to wait. And the thing would be, invariably squeaking because it was old. And,
Yeah.
that's what I do remember of the tapes that I was playing then, because my parents were not buying new tapes. I mean, my mum was, but she would buy opera stuff because she was an opera singer. So she would have musicals, and it was all stuff I wasn't interested in. And then I think a little bit later on, she was into, and my dad was also as well, but Fleetwood Mac. So I definitely listened to a ton of Fleetwood Mac a little bit later on, cassette wise. But yeah, so those are my first tape encounters. I'm just trying to think. I didn't know anybody, like reel to reel music was something that I didn't see until I was a lot older. And again, that was not very common in the UK either. So it
Yeah.
wasn't commonly found at flea markets. Whereas I live here in Oregon now, and I've lived in the US for 10 years and previously in California. And there is just old tech everywhere, old tape stuff, very easy to get hold of. You know, in the 90s, you'd rely on having to find something at a flea market. And that was just completely hit or miss. It was usually Bontempi, organs. I used to rate the quality of a flea market, our car boot sale, based on the number of Bontempi air organs that were around. And we would say, what's the Bontempi rating today? I would go with my friend and we go, oh, it was 2 or 3 today. And it was like, you knew what period of people that were purging stuff from their closets based on the Bontempi organ, which was kind of hilarious. But
Like how much Lawrence Welk or that sort of thing is, or Percy Faith is going to be there.
right.
We do this, by the way, man. I know you're a
Yeah,
little earlier, but I'm gonna.
go for it. It's my day off today. I've been working a bit of overtime, so my day off today as well. So I'm enjoying that. But
Okay, so yeah, so you made the kind of you discovered 8-track. You were in the cassette. Your parents had some stuff, and it was that way. And then you got discovered the 8-track, and then tell me again when you kind of discovered reel to reel.
So reel to reel, honestly, I was over, I'd moved over here, and then I started volunteering at a radio museum in the Bay Area in Alameda, called the California Historical Radio Society, CHRS. And I started volunteering my time there and helping them with things. And they had a huge archive of reel-to-reel tapes from radio stations and likewise. And it really wasn't, nobody was really interested in it. And interested in that, most people that wanted to repair things in the museum were repairing actual tube radios. And so the reel-to-reel players that came in, they were always a pain in the butt because, very complicated. And, an awful lot of them, especially in California, the cheap castings used for the running deck where all your pulleys and wheels run on, that material just breaks down. It's just cheap pot metal, and it
Oh
explodes.
yeah,
And so
sure.
it causes lots of problems, and lots of reel-to-reel players that were just cheap commercial ones were just a pain in the butt. You could spend all the time overhauling them electrically, and then you'd find there's some killer mechanical problem. So most of the guys there didn't want to deal with reel-to-reel stuff, and so there's just reel-to-reel players everywhere. And I'm there and I'm like, well, this is interesting, and I'm trying to find my niche, because I'm not particularly into vintage tube electronics. I'm just into digital microelectronics. That's my era
Okay.
of stuff. And so I didn't really have any desire to work on the electronic side of it, but I saw there was locked up again, going back to what I was saying as a child, when you had this thing in your hands that contained a room full of voices. I was like, there are shelves and shelves of reels here that people haven't listened to for decades, and they contain really interesting recordings. And so I just set about, I was like, well, what good quality decks do you have here? What can I borrow? What can I use? What can I overhaul? And then let's start digitizing the collection. And that's basically what happened. And so they were very happy that I turned up and said, that I would take these reel-to-reel players and give them some love and actually do something with them where most people, were not interested in doing so. And then once I'd got, a couple of good studio decks together and running, and loads of spares, and these were all, uh, master tape recorders, like Otari stuff.
Oh, okay,
I got
right.
a whole, yeah, like MTR, so I had MTR 10s, MTR 12s, I had an MTR 15 at one point. And I had
Anything that
loads of
people just,
spares.
once they figure out that you're interested in something, they just start giving it to you,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
selling
but
it cheaply. Yeah,
these are huge, bulky machines.
yeah,
They took up loads of room at the museum, and people, they needed the space more than they needed the machines.
yeah.
And so they were like, we need one good one. So I overhauled and restored one really nicely that went into their studio. And I said, this thing's a workhorse. You can use this here to do digitizations at the museum. But then, I'll have one at home and use that. And then, yeah, I moved on from the Otari MTR 10 and 12 series. And then I ended up getting Studer A810s.
Mhm.
So I had a couple of those, and I still have one. I mean, you can kind of just see the deck of it right
Okay.
there.
Yep. Hmm.
Sun's on it right now. But anyway, so that's my 810 right there. And then sitting right there is the TIAC X1000. Um,
Okay.
and so that's for the 4-track stuff. That's for your regular commercial 4-track stuff, and then half track and single track for on the Studer. So all 1/4 inch. And the collection was all 1/4 inch. We had very few
Half or
halves.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had some odd videotape stuff as well, but I didn't get too far into that. But yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I see you active in a various format groups. What would you say is kind of your? Like if you had to give. Well, I know that it may depend on your business, but what's your favorite? Like which just the one that you're just like, what I like. I just like messing with this the most.
Oh, it's definitely 8-track. Definitely eight
Yeah.
track.
You're-
Reel-to-reel tapes can be expensive for any of the good stuff. And I don't have deep pockets. I'm a bottom feeder. I'll go and buy stuff. I'll buy giant tubs of 8-tracks for, as for the one that you do want. And then you end up just like pulling your hair out over the bulk that you have left over. And so I have, uh, my collection, the stuff that I'm gonna keep. I don't know. I definitely have about um God, it's really hard to even say now. I definitely have about overall maybe 4,000 tapes. It's too many. It's far too many.
yeah.
Far, far too many.
Yeah.
Um, of the ones I want to keep, I think I worked out. I bought a shelving system, and I was like, well, that has room for about 960. I think it was. So I was like, 960. That's a good collection. I should pare everything down to that. Um, but right now, I think my keeper collection is probably 1,500, so that does need to be reduced. And then the rest of it is like, I sell a lot of 8-tracks on eBay, or I used to. It's been a bit quiet recently, but I enjoy sitting down with 8-track tapes and just overhauling them and
Yeah.
just
That's
plowing through them.
they're a labor of love, and they're of any format, I would say that they're the most work to like maintain, to get to a running status. I mean, you're just like constantly. I mean, whereas reel to reel, I mean, there's some work there. Cassette, I mean, not really. It's pretty much pop and play.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's obviously that the work you put into getting refurbishing an 8 track, you just feel like that's your baby, that your little
It
baby right there. And
it's sometimes it creates a lot of anxiety with me because you'll be doing a cart and there's a problem in the middle of the tape pack, and the only way to get to it is to unspool it to a point where you're dumping it on the floor, and you're going to have to respool it back up. And I know how long it takes to do that manually by hand. And so sometimes you're like, who is this artist? What is this album? Is this worth it? And if a lot of the time, my time is precious to me. I have so many other interests
yeah,
that I sometimes have to cut my losses on some and just be like, I can't deal with this, and that goes in a box of not dealing with it. Or sometimes you've gone so far, and then you're like, I've half dumped it out, but I'm going to have to dump out a bit more, and then you're like, this is going to take like another 40 minutes to respool properly.
yeah.
And like, it's just not worth it. I can go on eBay and buy one for like $3, but I want to listen to this music. So you're like, is it worth dumping my time into it to restore this worthless cartridge? I do that quite frequently. I'm not saying I have a really efficient use of my time by any stretch. But yeah, reel
No,
to reel, it's pretty easy. You can see the problems on a tape pack if it hasn't been wound properly, but that's not common at all. Most decks wind okay. You don't have the issues that you get with 8 track. 8 track, the players constantly need cleaning. You,
I think I was saying to somebody recently, there's always a ghost in the machine, just of some kind. It's you got to overcome. And speaking of spooling, I was telling a guy the other day that you talking about that, how it's, I mean, I do the uh making tapes for bands, and doing releases and all that stuff and customs. But so I run out of certain links of program links that I need. I'm always just like, I don't want I don't want to waste any tape, if I don't have to, so I don't want to just dump. It's like, oh, this something will happen, trash, I'll just, take it to as far as it'll go. And then until I've done everything I can. And then I'm like, which involves, a lot of time. So, I'll record it in the shell it's in, and, completely refurbish it. The pad's fine, everything's fine, the lubrication, the cleaning, everything. And then, record all 4 programs, listen back, all the programs are good, but program 4 will have, one channel will be perfect, the other channel will be very faint, and I'm like, so, re-record program 4. Sometimes that works, sometimes it was just like, whatever, goes to the machine. Now it's working fine. But sometimes it's not. So I'm like, okay, well, I need this 12-minute length tape. I'm running short on them. So got to spit it into another shell, put it back in backward, so now, it's on, the program 4 is now program 1.
right.
Re-record, start the recording over again. And then most of the time that does the trick, but
Yeah.
still there's like some other issue. And, so then I'll be like, RCA cartridges, to me, in my experience, are one of the most stable as far as recording and performance, function, and everything goes. So, a lot of times I'll just, I'll look at it and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to record this in this Warner cartridge. I'm just going to start off with, I'm just going to put it into an RCA cartridge and record it,
Right.
and put it back. But if it's something else like a Columbia, I'll be like, okay, I'll see if it works in this one. But if it, so I'll put it back in the RCA. Sometimes that'll work perfectly. But after I exhaust all those avenues, it's like, is that worth the time? All those album recordings? I don't
I
know.
mean, you're also dealing with tape stock that was, uh, sometimes even the manufacturers back in the day, they were using cheap tape stocks themselves, and the cartridge might look the same and you think it's from the same era, but that week at the factory they had a supply issue and they put in a different
Yeah,
kind of tape, and so you can't always be guaranteed of the quality of the tape, the thickness of the tape or anything, just based on, the external cartridge itself. And yeah, there's so many variables with 8-track that you wouldn't
there,
uh
there is. It's like, and then it's I go through this routine. Sometimes when I'm starting a recording, it's like I don't just hit push hold and record and push the tape in. I'll just I'll like pump. I mean, it's like I won't every single time I will pump the record
do you
and
mean
then put it
OCD?
in.
That's OCD.
Yeah, and then I'll pull it back out. I mean, no, because I'm like, you know what, because so many times, that good old ghost in the machine will get me, if I just do it fresh as if it's going to work, and then
Yeah.
I do the whole recording, and it's like the right channel on all 4 programs did not record, and
Right.
it's like, but before the tape right before it worked perfectly,
Right.
And so I'm just like, so I pump it, put it in, I pull it out, pump it some more, put it in, pull it out. I'll like hit the program button, let it cycle 2 times, and then I'm like, okay, if this has got to do it.
I think personally, I would not have put up with that nonsense. I would have pulled that player apart. And so, I mean, I understand the recording mechanism on a lot of these different players that I pulled open. And you use Pioneers, don't
I
you?
do, yeah,
Yeah, and they're a great sounding deck and they're a great recording deck, but I don't like their mechanism. I don't like their recording mechanism because you've got the slide, haven't you?
yeah,
For the record, and is it that one? Yeah, am I getting it right? Anyway, there's something about them. And I've settled on the Wallensack decks, the 3M decks,
yeah,
and I get
great,
I get a I get a very reliable response from them, and I know what's going to happen. And this is the same with all the equipment that I have as well. Is I don't want to have to waste time trying to finagle something to work. And the trade-off is I would have stripped that thing down and spent an inordinate amount of time analyzing it and making sure that it 100% is going to work the way I want it to.
yeah,
And I do believe every old piece of equipment can be brought to modern standards. It just depends how far down that road you want to go with it.
right,
And overly uh, I don't overly analyze the audio circuits like the reproduction circuits on the decks. I fix things that are broken, and I smooth off the high points if there's a disparity between the channels, but I don't mess with them too much. I don't do a full strip down, and a lot of people will repair things and replace everything, and I'm not that person, and I don't do that with all of my equipment. I'm a repairer. I'm not a shotgun repairer. I
right,
don't
yeah,
I don't replace a ton of stuff because I don't know what I'm doing, and I just want to get this fixed. If I replace everything, then go. The problem is that a lot of modern components that people use and put into these decks, they're not as durable as the stuff that's still in there. And a lot of the stuff that's still in there, I'm not an audiophile, and I'm not going to get into the whole it sounds warmer and there
yeah,
are different sounds, and I know when a deck has an issue based on the sheer number of tapes I've played. And with the 8-track tapes that I do restore all the way through, that's one of my things. Is I like to listen to albums beginning to end, and I don't skip between trying to find that one track. I will listen to something end to end. On an 8-track, that means you're playing the entire tape loop 4 times, which is great because that you in that 4 transits through your deck, you're going to find the problems with that cartridge. You're going to find that problems with the deck.
mhm.
So I like to
And
really
there's, I,
exercise.
I want to say, I mean, like when I was talking about, having to flip the tape and do all those kind of things, I think that they're just like, then you get into like the variances in the shell, and how it's interacting with the felt or foam pads, I mean, and the pinch roller, because I'll change out pinch rollers in that when I was saying like, so I do everything that you're supposed to do, and
Yeah,
then just start. Then I if I'm like, I need this length of tape, I need this to work, swapping out the pinch rollers, I'll swap out the foam pads,
right. Yeah,
I
well,
mean, it's
I
just like
mean,
until something it's like, and I can tell that there's a variance in this shell that's not
Yeah.
that's there's something going on that's
They're not made to tight tolerances. They're not made to the tolerances that you get on, studio recording decks. They're relying on plastic, for God's sake.
yeah,
Your pinch roller is going to be putting a slightly different amount of pressure on the capstan. The friction of your capstan is going to, have an effect on the friction of the pinch roller that you're putting in. Rubber rollers versus plastic rollers. You've then got, static issues that you can get. You can get, with friction, slippage issues. Also, the tape running through the cartridge, it's relying on your tape guides inside of your deck running over the head at that particular position.
yeah,
However, if there's some riding, if there's a slight angular difference, the tape cartridge itself that has its own tape guides, again, it's just not
yeah,
precise enough. And
yeah,
there's a reason why on a reel-to-reel deck, the tape itself will run through 3 or 4 different guides before it runs over the head. And the idea there is to really flatten it out and get a known position that it's not going to ride. The 8-track has a one shot
yeah,
over the head.
exactly. It's just got that
It,
one
it's just
guy.
like
Yeah,
you got to get it right there,
yeah,
otherwise. So the pickups in the head are either meant to, pick up flux on they pick up flux on a wide angle, but they're focused,
yeah,
but they will pick up on a wider angle. On a commercial deck, when you have far more narrow heads, you're not going to pick up the flux either side. So riding over the head very precisely is super important. And yeah, 8-track's just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of close. And
yeah. No,
what
I
I
was gonna
have
say
found
there's.
is the
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was going to say the Akai decks. I'm gesturing up here because I have an Akai CR80D SS. This is my surround deck up
Right.
here. I haven't managed to get myself a Wallensack quad deck, so I've gone with the Akai, which is the kind of the tank that everyone uses for quad. And right now I only have a Wallensack 8056, which is not a top end model, but of the others that I do have, like usually 8075s, the 8056 sounds amazing. But the Akai deck will pick up crosstalk way more than a Wollensack. And a Wollensack has far more narrow flux pickup on its head than the Akai. And you can definitely there's definite difference between the two.
Yeah,
And so long as you get the guides working properly on the Wollensack, they sound amazing and they do not pick up crosstalk. If you
that's
get
great.
crosstalk on
Yeah,
something,
and you know what I wanted to say about that? That yeah, I mean, Wollensack and Akai, I mean, those technically in a little bit better degree, they sound better than a Pioneer deck. But I just want to address, the reason why, which I know probably the reason why I made a choice to go with Pioneer was that it just has the options that make a mass production
uh,
situation work. It's got the auto stop pause, where it electronically pauses at the end of
yeah.
every track, which
And
I
and
versus having like an auto eject or some kind of mechanical pause. And
yeah.
also it's got the minutes and seconds counter, which is I mean, that's like gold to me, so it's like, it does good enough, but
It's
because I have
everything.
guys who are like, you need to be using like a Kai quad deck and
No,
having four digital channels, and I'm like,
you
look,
find what works for
if
you.
you're a Sunday afternoon recordist, yes. But if you're trying to just deal with a bunch of stuff and need these other options, then
Yeah.
you know,
Well, so for I think the Pioneers have a great sound, and I think the Pioneers record really well. Um, and like you say, there's a lot of practical implications when you're mass producing recordings. The Pioneer I would say, is a good choice. The Wollensack is terrible for its tape counter. You basically just have to disable it. It uses a rubber band, but uh, the the plastic gears that are used for the tape counter can split. They can still work, but they can split, and you will get wow. You'll get bumps because it's a direct drive off of the
Oh,
capstan.
okay.
And so the plastic gears in the Wallensack will actually affect your recording and affect your playback. So none of my Wallensacks have working counters because the plastic gears are always cracked. And I have yet to find the correct gear to do a replacement. But I also think the tape counter to me is not important, and implementing it, having it work can affect your playback. And I don't want that.
Yeah,
So
I
so
hear you.
the
Yeah, no,
Pioneer has a
that's
much better tape counter, and I absolutely stand by that, you
I
know.
mean, that to me, that's like so valuable. Like, and because it's pretty accurate for what it is. I mean, it's pretty amazing how. I mean, I give it a buffer of like 5 or 10 seconds.
Yeah.
When I factor in the things, but for what I mean, it's really accurate, and I mean, I'm just so happy that some manufacturer did that.
Yeah, and
Makes
the
it easy for me.
I've got two of the Pioneer decks. I've got a they're just not they're HR99, so I've got two of those. And when I look at those, their tape counters work smoothly. They don't affect the playback whatsoever. And bearing in mind, I've run my Wallensack on audio analysis equipment, and I'm running tones through it and stuff. And you can see the problems with the tape counter causing issues on the Wallensack. And the Wallensacks are not known for having strong motors. They're known for having weak motors. And it's true. I've had a bunch of decks, and I've got some that are just not up to snuff. You put a cart that has puts a slightly more pressure on the pinch roller, and you'll start to get wow. You start to go through your recordings. And then other tapes will play absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
But that's when you know you've got a problem with that Wallensack is when you start to get that. And I haven't got to the bottom of those problems. I'm just happy that my deck, when you find a good Wallensack with a good motor,
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Yeah,
And
totally agreed. It's incredible. I mean, they really did it right. Hey, you know what? Damn, we have less than a minute, but we're not done. I mean, can we do another Zoom meeting here
yeah,
and just do like maybe a shorter part two, because there's some other things I wanted to get to while I had you here,
yeah,
for sure. Can we do that?
yeah, that sounds
Okay.
fine.
All
Yeah.
right. So let's end it, and then we'll
Okay.
do like a part two. I'll send you another link here in a second.
All right. Thank you.
Good.